Gianna Biscontini. Welcome. And I have to say that because I totally butchered your name in the first pass. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, everyone, I am so excited to have Gianna here. And if anyone isn't familiar with her, I just want to start and open up with Gianna. One of the things I love about her is that she lives and marches to the beat of her own drummer and is unabashedly and unashamedly herself. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. So if you've got kids in the car, Gianna loves to swear about as much as I do. So just be aware if that's not your jam or you don't want that around right now, maybe hit the pause button and listen to it later. So Gianna, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here and to see your face again.
It's so good to see you. Well, we love starting in the middle, the messiest, stickiest point in the mud. So what was the moment that you realized you had to reinvent your relationship with work because it was not working?
Yeah, it's really tangible to me looking back. I had worked really hard and collected graduate degrees and beat myself up and gotten 4 hours of sleep and taken on everything because I thought that there was a pinnacle. And I remember the moment I got to the pinnacle and I had a good paying job. I was the most quickly promoted in my company at the time. I was doing really, really well. I had just gotten promoted. It was about 6 weeks into earning like a senior leadership position. And I was miserable. And it's really, really sad to see a pinnacle and to create stories and beliefs around that pinnacle and get there and realize it's actually not the pinnacle. It's the wrong pinnacle, right? You summited the wrong mountain or a misaligned mountain. I was working, 4 to 6 hours a day. I could get my work done really quickly. I loved, elements of my job. All of the shoulds were there, right? You should do this and you should do that. And anybody that I was talking to about how I wasn't happy kept kind of throwing it back in my face, right? But you make this much money and this is what you were working for and you get to work with, vulnerable populations. That's so you, and you get to do all these things. And I was like, I know. And I'm still, I killed myself to be here. And now I get to coast and be in this space. And it's not what I thought it would be. And it was really upsetting. And I had to really take a lot of time. I'm still on the journey of figuring out what that all looks like. But in that moment, I realized that I had glamorized this pinnacle and sorely overestimated what that would do for me in my life and what that would mean for me as an individual. It was very ego driven. And there was a little bit of an ego death in that moment. It was really uncomfortable. And I just sat there. I sat in it and I got really sad and I cried and I took a couple days and I just let it all come. To me, it was something I had to kind of be birthed through to get to where I am now.
So I love how you describe that in those moments, how there was that misery and you had to sit with it. What came to you? What was that process of allowing the answers to come to us? Because oftentimes when we hit this friction or this collision where we thought it was going to, and it's not, but we're not sure why or what.
Well, when that happens, we meet it with force, right? Yeah, but I spent so much time. Yeah, but I'm really good at this. Yeah, but I spent a lot of money on graduate school. And and then instead of going through a grieving process and allowing, we meet that moment with force instead of compassion and inquiry. And so when you meet it with force and then force it to work, and well, because I've gone this far, I'm going to continue to push, right? It's that sunk cost fallacy of, well, I've already put so much in, so I'm going to keep putting so much in. But in that time, you lose out on this. There's this opportunity cost of if you just stop in that moment and meet yourself with compassion and inquiry and noticing instead of judging of, wow, that's weird. I thought this moment would be something different. And it's not. And there's information and wisdom for me here. Let's just see what happens. We grasp instead. right? And we shut the door and we force and we say, nope, I don't want to see it. I don't want to be compassionate. I don't want to see what's here for me. I don't want to believe that there's anything else here for me because I planned for this and I'm going to keep running in that direction. And that's when you start digging the hole deeper. Right. And so for me, meeting that moment with compassion, and thank God I had a meditation practice at this moment, which really supported me in that, meeting that moment with compassion and giving myself some white space instead of just losing it or forcing or taking any sort of control was really what helps the most.
That's amazing. So you created space for yourself in order to be with it and not fight it and really seek to understand it. So what emerged from that white space for you?
It started me, I'm kind of off on this theory now of these life trajectory changing moments. And there are obvious ones, right? You get married or you get divorced or you have a child or you decide not to have children or you decide to, give up everything and move to France. And it's obviously changing your life trajectory. But in that moment, we have so many life trajectory changing moments and we just aren't open to them. We want to believe that things are linear because that makes us feel safe. And the more I can plan and the more I can control, the more linear I am. And the more I'm going to keep myself from having uncomfortable moments and I can just be safe and be comfortable. And then you kind of realize how boring that is. I think that's when you kind of get to march to the beat of your own drum and say, well, I did all the correct quote unquote things. I did all the right things. Maybe that's not for me. And so for being able to be in that space and set myself up on a journey, I took a month. I went to Europe. I looked around, I got out of my routines and rituals and societal beliefs and just put myself in a totally different world and came back and thought I can continue doing this, knowing it's not for me because I'm supposed to. Or I can choose the mystery door, right? I can choose what's behind door number 3, what's the mystery door, and take some time. And so I gave myself that space. I took a whole summer and then ended up changing my entire life. I got even more into meditation. I started creating courses for people in my industry of healthcare with high burnout. This was before the pandemic. And so now it's even worse. So I was teaching neuroscience-based meditation classes. I ended up working with executive leaders, well-known and not so well-known. I started executive coaching. I was coaching Navy SEALs. I started my employee well-being company. I really just unearthed what really mattered to me. And so when you have that white space and you're not afraid to ask yourself, what don't I actually give a shit about anymore? What did 28-year-old give a shit about? And what does 35 or however year old, what does the current version of me give a shit about? What do I care about? And allow that to guide you. It's scary. But it's gotten me down so many other more creative paths. I wouldn't have written a book. I wouldn't have coached leaders. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet all these amazing Navy SEALs. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be the founder and CEO of a company that I believe in.
And by the way, I'm going to toot Gianna's horn. So Gianna's an amazing behavioral scientist. So every time she talks about neuroscience or how your brain works, what I love about you is that you take your own human stories and other people's real human stories, but you understand kind of why we're doing what we do a little bit to a degree and what it takes to actually change behavior. So I love that you bring that lens to it. Your book is fantastic because it really pushes on the edge of how do you question the stories that you've been told. So if you guys haven't heard of it, Fuckless, A Guide to Wild, Unencumbered Freedom is a book about really, really asking yourself how much of what you're doing is about society's pressures and stories that they have put on you that you've then accepted as your own, and what it takes to reject those and write your own story. That's like my Jenny synopsis of the book. So how did your own experience in the book, like, I want to know the little magical, like, did one birth the other? Did the other birth the other? Like, how did this all come down?
Yeah, I was sufficiently in the CEO startup space at the time and facing what it is like to be a young female in the entrepreneurial business world. I was coming into a totally different space. So I was coming from a space that was 86% female dominated to a space that wasn't. And I saw all of these societal beliefs and just this archaic bullshit about what we tell ourselves about the capabilities of women and what we want and what we're capable of and where we should be and when we should stand up and when we should sit down. And there are all these heartbreaking, really opposing stories. And if you identify as a female out there, if you've had these experiences, you know what they are. You have to be really smart, but not so smart that it disrupts people around you or makes them feel uncomfortable. You have to be really, really capable, but not capable where you threaten other people around you. And so it's always you should be thin, but not too thin. And you should be, healthy, but not crazy about it. There's always these like shifts that women have to deal with. And it's just such a small, impossible middle that we're forced into. And I started seeing it and really feeling it in my business. And I kept thinking like, gosh, I've seen men do this half as well with a tenth of the plan, and they get so much more attention. They're so much more credible. It's just a lot of unearned credibility, I think. And I will say this with the caveat that so many men have read the book and love it. And so this isn't a gender, one against the other. It's these beliefs that I'm vilifying, these archaic beliefs. So I woke up October 1st, 2019, and I was just angry as hell. And I flipped open my laptop and just started writing. I thought I was writing a journal entry, which is weird because I have a pen and paper journal practice since I was 8. And I wrote the first 5 pages of the book about how women are conditioned to be the air and the water that support, but don't disrupt everything around us. And we're supposed to be this invisible force that takes care of everything and supports everything, but doesn't need anything. And so I wrote, and then the pandemic happened and I had a lot more time. And it just happened. There was no formal practice. It just kind of came. And the more I saw it, the more I couldn't unsee it. And so it's something that I'm really proud of, and that people of all genders have really embraced.
Yeah, because I think you worded it really well. And what I loved about the book is it's about the messages that society sends. Your book may specifically talk about messages women have received, but men have also received messages, and it all cascades back and forth. And some of your chapters actually really dive into that. So you were there in that moment when you started writing that book. How did it feel different from that moment of hitting the pinnacle? Like, describe these two different. So you started summiting the right mountain for you. How did you know it was the right mountain?
This comes kind of back to the subject of the book. There's conventional societal wisdom that is given to us. And then there's that inner knowing and intuition and that body wisdom. And you've all felt it. All of your listeners right now are going, yep, I feel what it's like physically to feel like you've hit a brick wall. And your whole body kind of goes limp and your soul feels like it's dying and you have such a hard time staying motivated. But instead we judge ourselves, right? Oh, I'm not dedicated enough. I'm lazy. I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not whatever enough. Instead of going, what's my body telling me right now? This is the wrong freaking mountain. Like I'm going the wrong way. And when I started writing Fuckless, I wrote for 5 pages and then stopped and had no idea what I had written because I was in such a flow state and it was just kind of coming. And I went back and I read the book, what ended up being the book. And it was like, yeah, this feels good. I didn't have to think about it. Anything that I have done that has been in alignment for me, that has been correct and has come from my body wisdom, that inner knowing. And it's a shame that for women, we really like to take that intuition and call it something different. You're crazy, you're emotional. I mean, all the archetypes that have been thrown our way. Instead of really honoring it, we've been vilifying it. And so I just started doing mini experiments, right? I would see how something felt. I would take a step and see how it felt. And if it felt good, I would take another step. And if it didn't feel good, I just got out of my head. I'm such a linear, really masculine energy kind of thinker. I'm very analytical. And because society has told me that that's a good thing. And you're so smart and you went and completed all these programs. It's like, that doesn't really mean anything. That means I can go from point A to point B and read books and produce reports. Like, that's not what I'm here to do.
Mhm.
And ever since then, it's continuously tapping into that body wisdom. And I think because we live in a linear society, some listeners might now be thinking, well, you can't just do what feels good all the time, right? We take it to this opposite end of the spectrum of, if we do what feels good to us, we're all just going to be sitting around doing nothing, eating ice cream and staring at daytime TV. And like, that's not humanity. That's not what we want. We are built to evolve and to produce and to create and do things. What makes us feel exhausted, like we want to sit in front of the TV and eat ice cream and watch daytime TV on our days off, is that we've been leaking our energy and climbing the wrong mountains. And so writing the book gave me energy. I mean, you read it. There
Mhm.
aren't cheery moments. I mean, there are really raw, difficult moments where I talk about not wanting to be alive anymore. That seemed like a really viable option for me. And I was like, holy shit, I understand what it's like to want to end your life.
Mhm.
Um, and the book is filled with non-cheery moments. It was very harrowing. During my press tour, people were like, what was it like to write the book? And they just wanted the rainbows and the puppies of like, oh my gosh, it was this lovely, beautiful, flowery experience. And it wasn't. A lot of it was really harrowing, but I still felt energized by it. I
Mhm.
still felt like, this story sucks, but I want people to know it. I think people can really relate. And sitting in those uncomfortable moments is when we get those lessons. And so I've just tried to not to avoid that. To me, that's where the magic is. And so the moment where I hit that pinnacle with work, I felt extremely sad, deflated, exhausted. My body felt like a wet noodle. When I was writing the book, I had so much energy. My brain was going, my body was going. I was out in the world doing what I was meant to do.
I love that. I love that. So I'm going to ask a very linear question, one that some people hate. What was the amount of time for you that lapsed between realizing you had climbed the wrong mountain to starting to realize you were summiting the right ones? All these mini experiments, all these breaks in restoration, like the process is never clean. How long
Yeah.
did it take?
Yeah, it's never clean. I would say the process isn't over. That's what you learn. It's never over. You're never like, oh, I'm just gonna just slide down this mountain and just scale up this one, and then I get to be at the top, and then we're done.
Mhm.
When you get to the top of a summit, you look around and realize there are more summits. There are mountains that you're looking up at that are new. That you said like this is a linear question, and it's the linear answer, right? We like to see we find safety and certainty in the black and white. I'm going to
Mhm.
do A and I'm going to do A for the rest of my life. And then I can finally stop learning and working so hard. And we hear this all the time. People complain about their jobs, but once I get a promotion, but once I get a promotion, but once I make it here, but once I do this, then I'm going to take some time, or then I'm going to say something. And those people likely hit those pinnacles of, oh my gosh, I got here. I thought I'd have more power or happiness or satisfaction, and I don't. Our bodies and intuition know so much more than we give them credit for. And so, yeah, I think getting to that point is just, you have to always evolve. You live an imperfect life of continual learning, continual successes, continual mistakes, and you get to choose that path and how you respond to those experiences.
Mm. So it's a constant climbing of the mountain and then the next mountain and then the next mountain with some ups and downs along the way. If you look at life before you were embracing it with that level of agency, I'm going to call it, because that's a big message and theme throughout your book, is that even though there's a lot of crap that we're handed, ultimately we are the only ones responsible for our own happiness. And so it's this idea that we actually have way more power than we realize, but we have to do something with it. So when you think about those two shifts, like, okay, life is happening to me versus, and by the way, I see the dog. I saw a little bit. So you guys, you have to know, Gianna's first and foremost a dog lover like me. So I have dogs running around in my background as well. So if you hear nails on the floor or tags jingling or whatever, We are mutual in our complete and total love of our dogs. So
Yeah, I just had to switch out a toy. She's like not, she just got diagnosed with heartworm and can't run around. And I didn't realize a new toy was squeaky. So now we're done with all the squeaky toys.
Oh, well, I didn't even hear it. So that's an impressive setup you got there.
Oh, good. It's a really cool toy, but it's loud. And so, yeah, I think before having that experience of that, messy middle moment, I did buy into the belief. I did give my power away to something else. We believe that the answers are out there, right? And once we attain something that society tells us that we should, it's first of all, I want to also honor this. I love that I had the opportunity to go to grad school and I love learning. And I am lucky in the fact that my process to get to that messy middle moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't what I want to do. And the industry is not correct for me. And I belong somewhere else. I'm more creative. I did enjoy the process. And I don't know that a lot of people do. We are on that, we call it automaticity. You just kind of do and do and do. And someone gives you a roadmap and you say, okay, great. And you follow it. And I think we need to make more room for contrarians.
Mhm,
It's a real service to yourself to be a contrarian in your own life
mhm.
and to question. I mean, I wanted to be a writer since 2009. I started telling people that I wanted to write a book, which was my first mistake because I told people that didn't get that side of me. And there was a lot of like what we would call punishment contingencies involved. Like, but are you in grad school for something different? And oh, but you're doing this, and oh, you can't make money writing books. And there was a lot of, I got caught up in other people's misunderstanding of what I wanted for myself. And I allowed myself to believe, well, because they don't get it, that also means it's incorrect for me. And because they don't reinforce it, it's incorrect for me. And FYI, nobody's going to throw you a party every time you make a right decision. You've got to take your own risks and go, yeah, my family doesn't get it, or my spouse doesn't get it, or maybe I don't even get it, but I feel pulled in this place. I feel pulled to this person or city or job or dog or whatever, and just trusting. But in those moments, we just look around at what everybody else is doing. And I think that's how we breed mediocrity. That's how we breed. And so it's being unafraid to step outside of what society tells you. I think society is really well intended. I'm going to just give
Yeah,
them the benefit of the doubt, right?
yeah,
I mentioned this in Fuckless. A lot of people that have given you their own bullshit and beliefs really love you
yeah.
and really think they're doing you a solid by telling you, no, don't be a writer, do this instead, or you can't make money doing this, or oh, that, don't do that, do this. And we love them and they love us. And we go, okay. And we give away our knowing, we give away ourselves and our path in that moment. And it's part of it. Everybody would and should do it. It's part of being an imperfect human. But it's when you have the awareness of getting to that place, when you have a moment where you think, I need to be the conscious one in my own life. I am the only person that has to live my life. And if I go in the wrong direction and summit the wrong mountain for 10 years, I don't get to the top and go, well, everybody told me to come here, so I'm here and I don't like it. It's like, what? But you packed your bags and did it. You packed your bags and went. And you just shrugged your shoulders and said, well, they told me to go, so I went. That's giving away your power. Don't do that.
Yeah, it's one of the steps in my framework is about controlling boundaries. For those who have piloted some of the early tools that we've got, one of the recommendations is how to say no with grace. And you really, really do this elegantly well. It's thank you so much for caring so much about my financial well-being. And I still want to do it anyways because money's not important to me, or just not explaining at all, but like figuring out a way that you can accept the love, but reject the ask. And those two things can both happen at the same time. And you do it just brilliantly well, both in your book, but also in the real life, because I know you and you do. So love that about you.
Well, thank you for that. And think of it as whatever you say yes to, you're saying no to other things. And so I think we are, especially women, are bred that to believe that if we say no, it's uncaring and unkind and selfish. And then you stop one day and you think, but when do I get to live my life?
Mhm.
I'm completely allowed to live my life. I have jurisdiction over my life. the only thing that we have jurisdiction over is our own lives, nobody else's.
Mhm.
And it's a reclaiming of time,
Mhm.
friendships, jobs, places. I'm nomadic now. So I have said hello and goodbye to a lot of different places. And it's really about what we invite in and taking accountability over our own lives. I think we secretly have a subconscious desire to go, well, if I do this, and it doesn't work out, I can blame this other person. I don't have to go, oh shit. I
Sometimes subconsciously, sometimes consciously, just saying.
Right, right. It's like, well, if it doesn't work out, I can just blame the person who told me to do it. Like I'm 5 and I don't know any better. It's like, no, you have evolved into this beautiful adult human. Do what the fuck you need to do. Like that's the adventure. This is where the adventure starts, right? I remember being a kid and being like, man, being a kid is so much fun. Why don't adults ever smile? Why don't they ever look happy like kids are? And as I started getting older, I'd get parking tickets and I had bosses and I had these soul crushing moments. And I'm like, that is how you go from this joie de vivre to being a soul crushed human. And I just never wanted to allow that to happen in my own life. Like that is my sage rebellion.
I love it. I love it. And by the way, I half listened to that because as soon as you said parking tickets, I remembered I got my first parking ticket ever recently that I have to go pay.
Oh no, I'm glad I reminded
I was like, oh yes, that was a soul crushing moment. I still remember when I looked up and realized I didn't see the sign.
Yeah, that happens. And you just maintain your joie de vivre. It's such, oh God, I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah. And you really talk about three key phrases: should, yeah, but, and but when I. Those seem to be like really key phrases that you have learned to listen to. And recognize them as signs. How do you respond to them? So we have to create this like habit in our brain that when we hear those words coming out of our either mouth or our head, what is the response that you find is most effective to explore whether or not that should, but when, or yeah, but actually makes sense versus when it's an excuse?
So I have the benefit of being a behavior analyst. So I know how to change my own behavior and I hack it all the time. We need a functionally equivalent replacement behavior. So I'm going to get nerdy for a second.
I love nerds.
If you want to stop doing something, you have to figure out why you're doing it and then figure out a better way to meet that need, right? And so in that moment where we say, I should, or yeah, but, or, whatever, shoulds usually come from fear, right? I should do this because it means something about me if I don't, or because someone is going to be mad at me if I don't. Usually in those moments, we're trying to avoid an aversive response from someone else. We're trying to avoid an aversive response from our boss, our spouse, or ourselves. And so in that moment, I tell myself, this is fear. I refuse to act out of fear.
Mhm.
It's just not neuropsychologically a great place to operate from. Our bodies are built for fear, not for hope and positivity because of the way we've evolved, right? This was once very, very good for us because we were being chased by tigers. And so to have like a healthy dose of fear, like if the bush is shaking over there and we have an oh shit moment where it's like, oh my gosh, I have to get everybody away from the bush, like our fear response kicks in and that keeps us alive. The tigers and lions and bears have turned into taxes and bosses and shitty friendships, right? And the things that we're afraid of. And so in those moments where I think I should do this, number one, the story always comes from somewhere else. It's never internal, right? It's always, why do I think I should do this? Well, because of something out there, because of someone or something out there told me that I should do this. And then my replacement behavior is, what do I think? What do I want to do in this moment? And how you can tell the difference, or at least how I tell it, the difference between fear and that like internal knowing is fear comes on really quickly. It's just like, this holy shit moment of, oh my goodness. And if I don't do this, somebody's going to be mad at me and that's going to be really bad. And we get into this weird space that's just fear. And now we're not even thinking correctly because we're in an emotional space thinking in the back of our brain. The body wisdom, the intuition, the inner knowing, it's really subtle. Just like, hey, what about this? Hey, what if you wrote a book And then like a couple months later, hey, what if you wrote a book? You know, it's quieter.
Yeah.
It's not aggressive. It's just patient. It kind of sits there and is like, okay, this might take you 10 years to figure out, but I'm just going to hang here. And in 10 years, where you figure out this was the path for you all along, you're going to go, oh my God, I've been thinking about this for 10 years. It's like, yeah, you have, right? And it's just been there the whole time, but it's less powerful than the fear. But when we feel fear, we want to get away from it as soon as possible. And so it's like, okay, I'm just going to do that thing. I'm going to say yes because I don't want that person to be mad. I'm going to overwork because I don't want to look not dedicated. I'm going to stay at this job because I don't like thinking about what that means if I quit. And so we're just running around in this fear, stress, allostatic stress response all the time. People don't understand how scared they actually are. And I will include myself in that. We're very fear driven in this society. Look at news, look at marketing, right? If you don't do this, these are the consequences. If you eat from a salad bar, you will get cancer and die, right? It's just sensationalist, alarmist, dramatic, because fear responses are a great way to get people to change.
Yeah.
We habituate to it. It only works in the short term. And then we have to get more alarmist and more sensationalist and more scared. And so it's just finding a quieter existence. I think that's why peace and quiet should be prescribed for like everyone.
Yeah, back to the white space concept. I love that you said that. That's the first step. Anytime I've been working with anyone on workaholism, almost always the first step is just get more white space. Very, very few people get enough white space.
Yeah. And if you think about it scientifically, you're just taking all the external stimuli away. You know, and I make this point in the book, you can do your own work. You can lock yourself in your house for a month and read Fuckless or other books that are like mine and do the same work. But then you have to go out into the world. And you've done all this work yourself and you know who you are and you know your path and you go into the world. And that's when people start, well, what about this? And well, I don't know about that for you. And I don't see that for you. And it's all of this stimuli back out in society that's pulling you away from that person that you know you want to be and really are deep down. And so that quiet white space, if you can fight the urge to turn on music, to turn on the TV,
Yes.
call someone, right? You'll notice and you're like,
Yep.
I don't like this. You know what? You're not supposed to fucking like it. We don't live in a world that encourages calm. And so when we have it, it feels very wrong and it feels uncomfortable. And we call that wrong.
Yeah.
If this feels uncomfortable, I'm in a different setting, and different settings produce different results.
Yeah.
You can stay in that space. And I mean, start off with hours, just be intense about it.
Yeah.
You get so many gifts. It's just so beneficial.
Oh, it so is. And the picture that I've been using to describe it is, imagine if you picked up a book and all the letters on the page overlapped. There was blobs of black paint everywhere. You couldn't read it. And if you don't quiet the noise enough, you can't actually see all of the insights that you already have inside of you and tap into them. So love that concept of how do you create. And I love the challenge to do it for hours, because that's actually where I find the most difference after about 2 hours of really slowing down is about what it takes. And yes, about 20 times during that, I want to grab my phone or I have something pop into my head. And it's like, release it and move on. So we can't do that all the time, every day. Get that. Most people don't have a life that can do that. But it is important to start to get good at incorporating it, both daily in small amounts and then weekly in larger chunks, et cetera. So you start to get that practice built out. So I absolutely love that, Gianna.
Yeah. And the great thing about that is if you can start more intensely and you'll have the benefits more intensely. And so if we're going to start any new practice, we need to have the benefit, right? If you lost 10 pounds or whatever people want to lose eating one salad, so many more people would eat healthy, right?
Yeah.
It's the reinforcement doesn't come until you change all these things and then the weight comes off over time. And anything is like that. And so when I taught meditation classes, people would say, I hate meditating. I suck at it. I can't go more than 3 minutes. It's like, you're not supposed to quiet it's not supposed to be quiet. If there's a lot of noise there, that's a good thing. You're learning how to cope and to deal with it. I mean, if you're talking to someone and they say, I can't sit in a room for longer than 5 minutes without having a drink, that'd be a real problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think you need help if you can't go more than 5 minutes without a drink of alcohol or without like
Mm-hmm.
wanting to take a shot or do a drug, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we sit around and we can't go 3 minutes without grabbing our phone, we don't call that the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like, you know what? It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And not to dramatize it, but it's just a behavior. It's a crutch. It's a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are more conscious, especially if you can do a couple hours right off the bat and just get that over with and just get into it, you get better at it. I mean, now I stop for 30 seconds and I can get into a totally different space, get
Mm-hmm.
a lot better at it. But it's like anything, you have to give yourself the chance and the opportunity.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so now comes the fun part where we try to describe the map and I see if I got all the milestones right because, I do have a linear side as well. So so the first thing it sounds like is you got to the top of the pinnacle and you realized you had summited the wrong mountain, which means it sounds like one of your first recommendations is summit the right mountain.
And what is the right mountain? I think we
There we go.
define the right mountain. That takes a really long time, but like envision the right mountain, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, like all of that.
Yeah, spend the time. And actually, one of the things you said really powerfully there is mini experiments. So try to put yourself out there in small ways to experience what these different things are like. And then from that, it becomes easier to figure out what the right mountain actually is for right now. And I'm going to say right mountain for right now because we all change and our mountains, is like you said, are going to change throughout our life.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Yeah. But in between those two, it sounds like there was a little bit of accepting that you were on the wrong mountain. And so I heard it was really about first stop fighting and just being with it. So stop fighting the fact that even though you should have been happy, you weren't. And I'm saying using that word intentionally, even though society's messages were saying you had it all and you weren't, that was a good moment to stop fighting that fact that you weren't happy and just be with that unhappiness and
Yeah.
understand what it is. It sounds like being curious about it was important. And one of the ways that you did that was taking a pause, adding more white space and getting out of your routine so that you were exposed to different things, travel and changing your circumstances. For those that can't travel, maybe it's just going to a coffee shop to be with your work for a day or having a day without meetings where you can just really sit and allow your brain to wander a little bit more around what's possible. Like not everybody has the luxury of just dropping everything and traveling. I totally honor that. So if you don't, there's so many ways you can still create novelty in smaller ways within whatever parameters your life allows you to have.
Yes, they actually do research on this. And there's even a shift if you go down a street, take a walk down a street that you've never walked down before. Go to, drive a town or two over if you can do that. It's just really putting yourself in a place that in a physical space where you've never been. Travel is my medicine because while I understand I'm not escaping any problems, I have a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
And so it's really just doing something that makes you happy and gives you joy, right? Instead of trying to like grasp onto this moment and treat it as a problem that you have to figure out. When you get in a space of joy and can marvel at something, even if it's walking to the edge of your street and going to your favorite park, marvel at something, get out of that space where you're like, oh, this is life, right? This is awakening me. This is bringing me joy. It gets you into a different mindset. And then you can turn around and look at that thing that you were unhappy with or whatever. The different perspective, I think, is really the magic there.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we're back now to those mini experiments, which you had so much fun doing. And really what it was for you, I heard, is really tuning into what your body is telling you every time you did one of those mini experiences. So what's my body telling me about this? Is this feeling good? And learning to get out of your head and into your subtle messages your body was sending you so that you knew what to continue forward on and what to pull back on.
Yeah, and trusting it. I think a lot of the times we don't follow our own knowing and we excuse it away with the yeah buts and the shoulds and the, oh, I want this, but I should that, or I want to do this, but someone will think some way about it. And so I think a lot of people listening right now are probably really resonating, going, yeah, I know my knowing. I just don't trust her or him or them.
I
I just
definitely have that problem. I definitely have that problem.
Yeah, because what you're knowing is goes against something you've heard. And you start that self-talk, well, I can't just do that. Well, I can't just do that. And then you go, well, why not? And so when you can reframe beliefs, it might seem like peanut butter and tractor trailers don't go together, but
Mhm.
you get to decide what you believe, and you get to decide what's right for you, and what beliefs do go together. Yeah, I can make a ton of money and not work that much. That's a big one for people.
Yeah, that's a
Nope,
big one.
impossible. Nope, that's impossible. You have to work your ass off and be miserable for 30 years, and then you get to retire and not work anymore and sit on a couch. Like, no, like throw all of the beliefs up in the air and just look at them and have fun with
Mhm.
it.
Oh, I
It's
love that. I
it's
love that. And that's a particular belief that has also come from a lot of different directions in society that our parents, the way, previous employers experienced from earlier in our career, that if we all started challenging that one belief, think of how much more creative we would be with the energy that we had if we were like, well, what if that wasn't true? What would it need to look like to not be true? That would be a powerful question. I love this entire audience to ask themselves and then message me on what you come up with.
I would love to know.
Okay, so you've got the shoulds, the yeah buts, the buts when. Those are triggers that you're in a fear-based, usually from an outside a stimulus. You need to replace that with another behavior. You did a really great job of giving us options. What do I believe about that? Is that belief actually right? So replacing every time you hear those words in your head, and helping to loved ones. I've told loved ones, like, tell me if you hear the word should come out of my mouth. Like, sometimes I don't hear it in myself, but others will hear it in me. And if we train them to let us know that they're hearing that, we can then ask ourselves the question of, okay, well, why am I doing that? And eventually we develop the ear ourselves so we don't rely on others to hear it. So
Yeah, and in that moment, just I want everybody to know that it's okay if you don't know. If you're like, this belief isn't mine and I don't actually believe this to be true, the next question is, well, what do I believe? It, be kind to yourself in that moment, because having to say to yourself, I don't know what I believe, is a moment where you kind of realize how much you have looked to other people to tell you what to believe. In that moment of, I don't know. I don't know who I am. I don't really know what I want to do next. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know what I believe about this. I've really depended on other people. That moment is magic. Don't miss that moment. Like, be really compassionate with yourself there, because that's growth.
Mm, I love that. And that is a perfect way to end. Any final, any final words for us, Gianna? Thanks for spending extra time, by the way. I love our conversation.
Of course, my podcasts always go long. I love these conversations. Have fun with it. This doesn't have to be, I think we're taught that everything has to be work, and for it to be work, it has to be miserable. You're here in a human experience, and there's only so much time that we're in these bodies, in these lives. And as you're doing this work and asking these hard questions, you can go into it with a mindset of just curious adventure and exploration, right? And like, somebody's bringing you to a new place and you have all day and all the money, and you don't have to be anywhere and you don't have to do anything except just look around, you
Mm.
know, and explore and pick up these rocks and, open these doors and just kind of look around, and just to see what you'll find, knowing you can pick up and put down whatever comes along the way. But to enjoy that curious adventure, I think is this the absolute loveliest way to do this work, and to evolve as a human.
Thank you so much, Gianna Biscontini. I love that you are a fabulous human, and I love being a fabulous human right alongside of you. Thank you for taking the time to really, really dive into what it means to let go of what we've been told is true and find our own truth.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure as
Thank you.
always.